My name is Dionne Bremyer, and I'm the director of the Initiative on Race and Resilience. I'd like to begin by acknowledging our presence on the traditional homelands of Native peoples, particularly the Pokagon Potawatomi, who've been using this land for thousands of years and continue to do so. IRR recognizes Notre Dame's place in the history and practices of colonialism and understand that the responsibilities extend beyond this gesture of land acknowledgement. Let us reflect on the University of Notre Dame's past, present, and future relationship with the original stewards of this land and actively pursue ways to amend this troubled relationship. As an entity, the Initiative on Race and Resilience had a difficult task this year in considering how to honor Walk the Walk Week. Walk the Walk is a week-long series of university, department, and student-sponsored events that invite members of the Notre Dame community to reflect on how to foster a deeper sense of belonging and inclusion to build the beloved community. The idea of the beloved community was articulated by Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, quote, "The aftermath of nonviolence is the creation of the beloved community." This community envisions a society built on love, justice, and equality, where conflicts are resolved peacefully and everyone is cared for. And yet, here we are in this moment of absolute violence, both nationally and globally. At IRR, we wondered how we might begin to honor this concept of beloved nonviolent community at a moment that was so fraught and felt so distant from the notion. It was in that moment that I was reminded of Frederick Douglass's What to the Slave is the 4th of July, given on July 5th, 1852. In 1852, America was a nation increasingly fractured over slavery, with events like the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act fueling Northern resentment and Southern anxieties. It was also the year of the publication of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. At this moment, America was a nation teetering on the edge of profound change, marked by the end of its existing political order and a society deeply divided over the issue of slavery. Yet on July 5th, 1852, the Rochester Ladies Anti-Slavery Society invited Douglass to speak, choosing a moment to highlight the moral contradiction of a nation celebrating liberty while holding millions in bondage. Douglass purposely delivered his speech on July 5th, not the 4th, acknowledging that to the enslaved, the nation's Independence Day was a day of irony. In his speech, Douglass highlights the stark contrast between America's celebration of freedom and the brutal reality of slavery. It is the hypocrisy of the ideals and the reality of a nation that he calls to attention, saying, "Your boasted liberty, an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour." He emphasizes that the 4th of July is a day of mourning for enslaved people, not a time of rejoicing, as it underscores their lack of liberty. This speech serves as a scathing critique to awaken Americans to their moral failings, urging them to confront slavery and to live up to their founding ideals. In essence, Douglass argues that for the enslaved, the 4th of July isn't about celebrating independence, but about recognizing the profound injustice and cruelty that denies them the very freedom of the nation they claim to cherish. "The 4th of July is yours, not mine," Douglass says. "You may rejoice, I must mourn." I feel this mourning echo repeatedly in recent weeks. The echo that the United States as a physical place, but also as a concept and as an idea, belongs to a specific group of people. And yet that is not the ideal of America. And this is the hypocrisy Douglass, like the ghost of America past, present, and future, points us to. But let us not forget that despite Dr. King's hopes for the beloved community, the United States is a place that was forged in violence. Emancipation from Great Britain took a war, as did the end of slavery with the start of the Civil War just 9 years after Douglass gave this speech. And yet, I hope in this moment that it is not our history of violence that we can lean into, but the promise of a brighter future. To quote our wonderful contemporary poet, Lin-Manuel Miranda, "Dying is easy, young man, living is harder." It's harder to envision a future and a legacy, and to imagine a future in the midst of turmoil. And yet, it is that notion of hope that drives us forward. It is hope that I want to be our guiding beacon in this moment. It is with Douglass's words in mind and Dr. King's vision in our hearts that IRR has asked Eirinie to come today to speak to us at this moment that feels pivotal in the history of this republic. As both a child of the diaspora and the empire and a new American citizen, she can speak powerfully and thoughtfully about what it means to embody this hope in the light of the complexities of this particular moment. Eirinie Carson is a Black British writer living in Northern California. Her work has appeared in LitHub, Mother Magazine, the Notre Dame Review, Mortal Mag, Electric Lit, the Sonora Review, and other places. She contributes to her local paper, the Argus Courier, via a column, Eirinie Asks. Eirinie's first book, The Dead Are Gods, which is hopefully going to be for sale shortly behind us, before you go today, was critically acclaimed by Oprah Daily, Nylon Magazine, Shondaland, The Washington Post, as well as winning a Zibby Award. It was also named one of the Kirkus Review's best books of 2023. Eirinie's first book of fiction, a maternal Gothic novel called Bloodfire Baby, comes out in February. We're delighted to have Eirinie here with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Eirinie to give her talk.
This allows me to move around and do some crowd work. Hi. Okay. Hope is an anchor, baby. My accent will tell you before I get the chance to. I am not from here. I am from London, specifically southeast London. London is a city bisected across its middle by the Thames, and I grew up on the south side of that famous river. When I was a kid, cab drivers refused to take you home from central London up on the north side if you requested a drop-off down south. When I finally moved out of my mother's house, I moved to East London, other side of the river, where a stroll through Bethnal Green to the club I worked in led me past an immortal quote by famous British trade unionist Bob Crow. But more on him later. Remember Bob, he's important. I moved to the US when I met and married my American husband. I've been here since 2013 and eligible for citizenship since 2016. I only officially became a citizen last October. I'm not sure why I waited. Perhaps simply because I had the luxury to. My children are Americans, my little anchor babies. My green card was in date. What was the rush? Why pledge my allegiance under presidents I saw nothing of my morals and beliefs in? Things changed in 2025 when stories of green card holders being detained and questioned began circulating. Before a trip to Portugal with my best friend, I prepped furiously, making sure my immigration lawyer's number was distributed amongst family and neighbours. There were rumours that non-citizens were stopped at the border, their phones checked for anti-Trump messages. No such stops occurred for me, and my immigration lawyer was laissez-faire. I had no criminal record, nothing in my past that should indicate I was a threat to American safety. When I got back home, I decided the time for citizenship was nigh. You'll do fine, my lawyer said. It'll be easy. Across an ocean in the UK, my father, a Jamaican by birth and Londoner by immigration, has no lawyer. He communicates with the Department of Immigration directly. They send him terse letters explaining why, despite his marriage to a British citizen, despite fathering British children, despite his almost 40-year history in London, he must return to where he came from. Where he came from. Go back to where you come from. What non-white person hasn't heard this shouted from a bar, a passing truck, a group of cheeseburger-faced idiots leaving a game? In the UK, we have the Windrush generation, named after a ship that carried the Caribbeans to the UK between 1948 and 1971. Those colonies that had answered a call to arms during World War II had been promised citizenship were they to survive. Hundreds of black and brown people from the islands immigrated to the UK to start lives in Britain, and in 1971 were granted indefinite leave to remain. In 2018, it was discovered that no records were preserved to prove this, and the UK began deporting immigrants that had been there legally since the 50s. Many were forced to go back to places they hadn't been in decades, or in some cases involving children barely remembered. Home was the UK, wasn't it? Home was there. According to DNA testing, some of my ancestors hailed from West Africa. Exactly where and exactly when is, like so many casualties of colonialism, lost to history. Where is home when you cannot pinpoint your ancestry? Where is the anchor? I have tried to make my own anchor. Raised by a white mother in a diverse city, I left home to make one with my husband. But this accent, it follows me. It calls me out even if I don't want it to. A privileged accent, people think me smarter just for the way my voice sounds, but still, I am other. In many ways I am other. Black, queer, woman. I am making a home. I revised for my citizenship. I read sample questions, contextualized dates, memorized when the Constitution was written, which is 1787, and who the president was during World War I, which was Woodrow Wilson, famously. I figured out what was and wasn't being said by Homeland Security with these questions. Not said, who we buried to build this country. Not said, the wrongs we never righted haunt us still. Not said, we feel rudderless, lost because we refuse to look back, and if you can't know where you came from, you sure as shit won't know where you're going. So, where I come from, London, as I have said, and Jamaica, and beyond that, there are stories about the beyond. I'll tell you some now. Let me tell you what I know about the Zong massacre. In 1781, a British slave ship destined for Jamaica ran out of drinking water. We know the enslaved people came from Ghana first, and before then we have no idea. They were kept in Cape Fort Castle in Ghana, a place you can still visit today. The floor of the dungeon where the enslaved were kept has inches of filth still visible. Filth that, when investigated, was discovered to be blood, excrement, flesh. The enslaved sat in this for months before they were moved for shipping. This particular ship, the Zong, had taken out insurance on their captives, as if they were cargo, which was custom. When, in the Caribbean Sea, they discovered their lack of potable water, they began throwing the enslaved overboard. 133 human beings were tossed. The ship owners tried to claim compensation for their loss of income. The Zong massacre became a pivotal case in the abolitionist movement, with arguments about the worth of a black life and what labour was lost, and what the ship owners should be compensated. But nothing was said of the survivors of the Zong massacre, who were sold, likely from the Black River slave market, likely to sugar plantations of Jamaica. I am made up of many parts, many countries, many stories, many juxtapositions. On the other side of my family, my great-great-great-grandfather, a Dutchman, was the right-hand man to King Leopold, who ruled over the Congo, who was a man who favoured the amputation of a hand of any enslaved person he deemed to be falling short on their rubber quota. These are some of the roots of my ancestry. The passage to freedom, the passage to citizenship, the passage to forgiveness and hope has not been easy. And now, today, my father fights the courts to be seen as a citizen. His daughter, too, becomes a citizen of another country as she studies and preps. Every day, I meet people grappling with what it means to belong. I volunteer at a needle exchange once a week. One of the employees there, a dynamic, hilarious 23-year-old Californian named Lady, congratulated me when I passed my citizenship. Over my time working there, I've gotten to know her. She's told me of her Mexican parents' journey to America. She's told me what an Edgar is, and you can Google that. It's an inside Latinx joke. I told her that her British accent sucked, and I explained why I don't know our national anthem, because we're just not as patriotic as you guys. One day, as we packed wound care kits and cold weather provisions for the people who frequent the non-profit, she joked to me, "Isn't it funny that you're now more American than me?" I didn't laugh, I faltered. Lady, a Californian through and through, travelled to California from Mexico as a small child. A journey that cannot be understated. A desperation, a hunger for America and its promises, its hopes. She isn't a citizen, because she cannot be. She sounds like a Californian, eats like a Californian. She drives very much like a Californian. She has paid taxes and works hard at a job that serves the most marginalised of us. And yet, me and my quite frankly flagrantly British accent are considered more American than her, just because my husband and I could afford a great lawyer, just because I crossed oceans and made up country borders, as Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem would put it, the right way. It wasn't funny and it wasn't fair. Lady had served her time in a country that has never stopped proclaiming its hate for her and people who look like her. If ICE came to our neighborhood, they would bundle her up and take her off to some detainment center in Texas. They would most likely check my papers, nod tersely at my white American husband, the house I own, the children I have birthed. Not this time, they would say. When Trump and his team coined the phrase, "Make America Great Again," when they printed it on 1,001 red hats that make anyone above the shade of a paper bag hesitate when they see it, they weren't thinking of Lady or me. We were not included in their renovations. And yet still I toiled for the citizenship test. I amassed the birth certificates of my parents and my husband's parents, of our children, our marriage license, social security cards, bank statements, and proof that we own our home. After this endless paperwork, in which I was also required to recall the address of every residence I've ever lived in, I dressed to the nines for my interview at 10. We lined up outside the building, 100 Montgomery Street in downtown San Francisco. A man with a gun checked our appointment email and ushered us in. I went to the second floor. I waited in an echoey hall, realizing too late that the boots I had chosen to wear squeaked with every other step. I tried to tread lightly. An agent, younger than me by at least 10 years, walked across the vast space towards me. He didn't smile. He didn't make eye contact. He waited until he was in front of me to look up from his paper and say my name, incorrectly. I nodded close enough and followed him as he beckoned. We took a silent elevator together, and in it I tried to remember the name of one lake in America, one of the men who signed the Declaration of Independence, one branch of government. We reached the agent's office and I sat at his desk. He took his seat behind the computer solemnly. I tried to conjure up a feeling about the importance of this moment, which was hard because throughout this grown man's office, all over this DHS federal agent's desks and shelves and cubbies, were hundreds of Labubus. Different shapes, sizes, and colours. A diverse array of Labubus. A cornucopia of Labubus. The united colours of Benetton of Labubus. My children don't even care about Labubus. I even hate how many times I've had to say Labubus just now in here. This was who held the gift of citizenship out for me. The agent asked the questions. I knew he would first ask 6. If I got one wrong, he would ask 7. If I got another wrong, he would ask 8, and so on, up to 10. What happened if I got 10 wrong? I asked. The agent shrugged. You just make another appointment. When was the Constitution written? He asked. I looked at the Labubus, their pointed buck teeth grinning at me, mischievous eyes twinkling. They refused to tell. The next 5 minutes were a blur, but I answered each and every question so that by the time we completed number 6, I was provisionally approved for citizenship. The agent congratulated me, told me anecdotally that the computer randomly picks the questions, not him, and that once he had a man whose first 4 answers to the first 4 questions were all George Washington. I was pointed down the original entry hall I had come through for my citizenship ceremony. The citizenship ceremonies happen every hour, so if you miss one, you just catch the next one like a bus. In a hall with about 50 other would-be citizens, I sat and watched a video on the importance of what we were about to undertake. The president came on screen with a pre-recorded video from the Oval Office. I won't do the voice. You are about to accept the greatest honor ever given by human hands. He actually, verbatim, with the mouth on his face, no word of a lie, said. Then, for the first time in my life, I put my right hand over my heart and spoke the Pledge of Allegiance. When I did it, I looked at the flag. I looked at the things that it included and the things it left out. I pledged for what I hope this country can be, for the good parts I aim to foster, to nurture, to grow. The hope is ours, the immigrants, the Native Americans, the enslaved brought here against their will. The hope was nurtured like the seeds the enslaved Africans braided into their hair to take something of home with them to whatever unknown shore they might find themselves on. The hope belongs to the Native Americans who survived residential schools, who had their hair cut but knew it would grow back, who didn't let their languages go dead on their tongues. Hope is survival. Hope is in spite of. We are living through another in spite of time. It's nothing new. The only thing that has changed is the colour of the people being murdered and detained. Whiteness was always a construct, and we can see that in the execution of Alex Pretty. Something in Minnesota reminds me of John Brown, abolitionist for the ages. A man who knew that resistance and hope sometimes looks brutal, that sometimes protest is not enough, that people have to die for change, for seeds to take root. The true citizens of this nation that is so full of beautiful possibilities, the true citizens are the ones who look at it and think, yes, there is good here. Despite all this, despite the mess and the murder and the abject hate, there is something here that has always been here before British immigrants staked their claim, before the soil was ever tilled by black hands. As poet Maggie Smith wrote, any decent realtor walking you through a real shithole chirps on about good bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful. History repeats itself. Even the newest of scholars can see this. Even a child can point to the familiarities in a repeating pattern of historical tapestry. It is exhausting to see the genocides continued unprevented, to see fascism on the rise, Islamophobia, so familiar to those of us who were alive during 9/11, reanimate, its red eyes glowing. What are we learning, then? What lessons will sink in? Perhaps none of them. Sometimes I feel like I'm being pulled inward by despair. Despair at our inability to learn a lesson, our short-sightedness. But perhaps, in addition to despair, we are able to gestate hope. I am the product of so many wrongs, so many fleeing citizens. I am the product of hope. I felt it, true, pure, uncut hope when pregnant with my first child. The promises I made to my burgeoning belly, the life I saw for her, unfurled from my womb out onto the ends of the earth. Black and brown people were being extrajudiciously killed by bad apples, which made it sound like Michael Brown and Sandra Bland and Tamir Rice and George Floyd had been simply wandering through orchards and just been struck on the head by something rotten. And despite this, when my child was born, I made promises to my brown baby I knew I couldn't keep. I will keep you safe, I whispered. I will protect you from all the murk and mire. I will hold you aloft out of the filth so that the world and all its goodness can be yours. I still believe that. A ridiculous belief, but one that was bestowed upon me by my own mother, and before her, my grandmother, and before, and before, and before. You've heard that the DNA of each future child exists in the ovaries, the testes of the previous one, even before they reach sexual maturity. A Russian doll system of hope, because what else then is pregnancy? Pregnancy in wartime, pregnancy in enslavement, pregnancy as ICE arrests parents at school pickup lines. The gestation of hope is a delicate thing. You can't be naive. No. You have to be a realist. What will they eat? Where will they live? How will we survive? But at the core of all of this realism is a seed, a dream. Nurture it, care for it. Let it grow and expand the meat and muscle and skeleton of you. Let it burst out of you in a glorious, bloody, triumphant, pulsating mess, screaming into the new world because it is new. You have made it so. A new world crying in your arms, searching for your breast. And then, as the old adage goes, your heart will be external to your body. Hope cannot exist in a vacuum. Hope is, by its very nature, fragile. You can't hold it selfishly to your heart. You must let it drift off, out over the big wide world, crossing borders and oceans, and hope it lasts long enough to produce more of its own. When I think of hope, my mind goes to videos of Palestinian children clapping hands and singing songs as drones circulate above them, some distant operator calculating which load to drop and when. We are also those children, dancing beneath the doom, because what else can be done but dance? What else have we been doing since time immemorial? We dance because to be crushed would be to die. We sing because to be silenced would be to die. We clap because, God damn it, if we clap together, it would be cacophonous, a deafening sound. If we clap together, we could break the sound barrier, reverse the earth, turn back time, start again. In front of our flag, right hand on my heart, I pledge to bear arms, if needed, for the United States of America. But if push came to shove, I think I would rather bear its hopes. Honestly, laden me up with them, because if being pregnant taught me one thing, it is that you can rub the crystal ball opaqueness of your burgeoning belly. You can rub it in the face of wildfires and hurricanes and death and destruction, and despite it all, you can imagine something different. You can imagine a whole new world, if only you try. So I know, land of the free, home of the brave. I know that the braves of the Cherokee tribe were massacred, separated, renamed, and relanguaged. I know that speak English has been spat at many a dark-skinned person just minding their business. When we are here because of you, in spite of you, for you. Because Make America Great Again never did have anything to do with the colonizer, it was always the colonized. Time travel back to the root of it, the beginning of it, find the seed of goodness before it was halved into the seed of hope, a remaining splinter of a remnant of a time when all things were viable. Turn back around, because then is actually now. We hold the crystal of possibility in our hands, and oh look, there's a weight to it, a real weight. And before we can spiral off into the ether about the future of this planet, what pain we have wrought for the children of this world, then and now, it is hope that weighs us down. It ties us to the earth. Hope without action is delusion. We must do something with it. Revolt is not new, and neither is hope. And hope together, imagine what we can do. Imagine the things we could spear into the ground, the things we can let go. Imagine what we can grow, a little seed anchored in. And what of Bob Crow, the trade unionist? I told you to remember him. The words I walked beneath on my way to work or on a way to a night out. The words I read over and over until they morphed from graffiti to a puzzle, to an understanding, to a mantra. Those are the words I will leave you with. If we all spit together, we can drown the bastards.
You're amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I thought Eirinie and I would talk for a minute and then just open it up to questions. So an interesting story, we were having dinner with the assistant director of IRR last night, and he said, well, how did you two meet? And I said, yeah, we met on a plantation, which is a funny thing to say. But we did actually meet on a plantation.
That's a meet cute for the ages.
Yeah, I know.
Hollywood, where are you?
We met on a plantation. We were at a writing residency that was on a former plantation right outside of Lynchburg, Virginia. And one of the things we did together while we were there was go to see a cabin that's on the campus of Sweetbriar College that is a cabin of a formerly enslaved family. And I think it's so interesting, I think, for two people who do not come from the United States originally, to have that experience of seeing a place where formerly enslaved people lived. I think one of the things that's interesting about the Caribbean is that there's fewer sort of remnants of that kind of thing. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what that means, sort of thinking about sort of American Blackness up against sort of diasporic Blackness.
Yeah, I think an interesting thing about America is that enslavement happened here. I'm from a country where enslavement happened elsewhere. We outsourced it, so we never have to actually look at it. Super smart. And so I think our relationship with even racism is completely different because the UK is adamant that we are not a racist country. And they truly have said that with their mouths. And I really think that is in part because you can deny so much when it wasn't happening there. You had, stewards of the land who were sent over to oversee the work that was being done there. But you never had to look at those people. You could be quite removed from the sugar you put in your tea. Whereas here, there were runaway slave posters on walls in businesses, and it was a very apparent relationship. You couldn't really escape that. And yeah, you're right, Jamaica doesn't really have that same... I think also because Jamaica, we know, was one of the most brutal places to be an enslaved person. The death rate exceeded the birth rate by... Do you know the stats?
It's at least twice. I mean, yeah. In so much of my research, I see it described as a suburb of hell.
Yeah, it was particularly disgusting and grim, and I wonder whether just decimation is why that's not as... I don't know. But yeah, it was fascinating to see that cabin because they had carefully kept this little cabin on this land, but demolished the others. So you couldn't really see it in context of anything and actually look quite sweet. But you look at it and you're like, oh, they planted flowers out front, which I fucking bet weren't there back in the day. You couldn't go inside to really get a scale of the space, nor could you really understand what it meant to live there. How many hours were you actually spending in that cabin and versus in some form of work? And I found that quite interesting. The whole image was neutered. They'd made such an effort to preserve and yet kind of defanged it also.
I love all the things you said about the idea of home. And I think about that a lot in terms of both being an immigrant and what that idea of home is and what it means, and the ways in which it's complicated. Where does home feel like for you now? I mean, how do you define that idea of home?
I don't know. I don't want to be a poetic wanker, but I guess home is where my children are now. I know, it's very sweet. I think London, it will always be my home. I think I'm very proud of being from London. But I don't know. Are there people in the world who feel a distinct tie to one specific place? Are there people in this room who are home to me is this spot? Or is everyone living with this kind of duality? Anyone? See, I feel like everyone agrees that it's a disparate concept, home.
It's complicated,
yeah.
right? How do you both love your home and be critical of it, and how do you, sort of live with those two things simultaneously?
Yeah. And I think one thing the UK is really good at doing is we can critique ourselves quite well. Because we're so hilarious, I think we're really good at making jokes about ourselves. But I feel like the ability to critique maybe isn't as, perhaps that's changing now, but it isn't as prevalent in American society. Perhaps that's probably why I don't know my national anthem, because it was never essential for me to do so, to prove something. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I wonder if that's sort of the same. I tell people this, which I don't think they do anymore, but growing up in Canada, we sang every morning, took a lot of time in the morning, the Canadian national anthem in English and French, and then God Save the Queen in English and French. There was a lot to do before the learning started. It's amazing I made it here today with all that. But, I think that in some ways, and this ties back to sort of some of the things you were saying about Jamaica, I sometimes wonder if this idea of England as a concept and as a place is sort of more present in the colonies than it is even in the United States in a weird way, right? That England is sort of the big bad guy in the Revolutionary War, right? The idea of England is somehow larger and more threatening, right? even Hamilton that I referenced, right? There's the character of the king, right? That's very, that's played for laughs, and that in some ways, like the idea of England versus the actuality of England are sort of are two kind of different things. Have you found you sort of butted up against that, both with thinking about your dad's kind of story of immigration and your own experience immigrating here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's why the sun never set on the British Empire, because they were able to loom large. Even though if you visited the UK and you saw all those silly little streets and everyone has fucked up teeth, you'd be like, why are we letting this happen? I have had many orthodontics coming to America, thank you so much. But I don't, Britain is such an interesting, complex place. In so many ways, we are still rooted in antiquity, so we still have a monarchy that largely serves no one, and there is a certain amount of freedom coming to America and not having that. I think England's quite a fusty country. We're like really into rules and regulations and bureaucratic stuff, and so being free of that feels nice. But then I don't know. It's interesting because the Windrush scandal that I referenced in what I just shared is such an example of the bureaucracy gone wrong. They fucked up. They had no record of these people that they promised, who've given their lives to have this gift of British citizenship or British right to remain, and then had messed up, and because they have to do things by the letter, they deported those people anyway.
Right. Wouldn't have many of those people, I haven't found sort of good information on this, but wouldn't have many of those people have come in on a British passport anyway?
That's a good question.
My grandmother had a British passport up until Jamaica was independent in the 60s, so...
I imagine they would have, because they also have British currency.
Right.
Yeah, that's
so,
a good question.
it's a strange sort of thing. But, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
You can't say you're invited into my house, but then I didn't invite you.
Yeah,
so.
It's like, and you've been here forever, and you paid the ultimate price. Watching my dad deal with it, and it only came up because he had a series of aneurysms that kind of made him legally disabled, and in trying to claim disability, they were like, actually, hold on a second, let's just check these facts and figures before we go throwing money around, and that is why he's in this battle, and it's nearly impossible. He's from a very small town in Jamaica, country town, not well archived, those things, and so trying to get him any documents that prove who he is and where he's from is near impossible, and that is largely as a result of colonialism too. The problem that he's grappling with is their problem.
Yeah. Well, I could talk to you all night, but I get to. So let me open it up for questions. If anyone has questions, if you want to put a hand up, I can bring a mic around.
Jada.
Hello. I was just curious. I recognize that the book isn't out yet, but I wanted to know if you feel comfortable speaking about the departure and going from a writing process that's mostly a meditation on grief to one that's, I guess, more thought of as something, normatively speaking, associated with renewal, like the process of going into motherhood, especially since the book seems to be marketed as a Gothic tale. So, like, what is that? What is that doing? Yeah.
I'm really sorry for the people who've already had an answer similar to this today from me, because I might repeat myself, but renewal, motherhood as renewal is interesting to me because I see it, I understand, I think that's how it's advertised, but I didn't really feel that way. For me, my first book is about grief, the loss of my best friend, and when she died I had like an 18-month-old. And then was going through grief and also parenting this tiny child who doesn't care about any of those things. Still doesn't, actually. Recently, I have a friend, my friend who died was called Larissa. I have a friend called Marissa who I went to see recently. And I was like, I'm going to see Marissa. And my kid was like, isn't she dead? No, different person. Anyway, But then I got pregnant again, and the postpartum time with my second child was there was so many bells ringing that were like grief to me. There was so much loss. I don't know if I felt it differently that time because I don't know. Postpartum hits differently each time, but I recognized so much of it. So for me, it doesn't feel like a big leap to go from that book to this book. To me, there are threads of the same, particularly of the loss of being a child, I think, too. I think a lot about my own mother and her mother. I'm the eldest daughter of the eldest daughter of the eldest daughter, the eldest daughter going 8 times back. Each firstborn child was a girl, and I have an eldest daughter. And I am convinced, like, I must be able to fly or something, no? That seems like there's some witchcraft there. I haven't tried it, nor will I, unless you buy me a drink. But I think about that loss of being the child and what it means to graduate up into adulthood, which I wasn't really ready for. And so, yeah, it doesn't feel disparate to me. It makes a lot of sense, and I think postpartum, unfortunately, in our Western society, a lot of it happens in the dark on your own, and there's nothing more gothic than that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Other questions?
Thank you, that was amazing.
Oh, thanks.
So I'm gonna out myself as the person who asked where you guys met. And, then as of now, there was a lot of humor involved in us thinking about that. And I think that in many ways, it's very clear that this is kind of central or foundational to how you sort of work through these otherwise very grim topics, ideas, and histories. And so I was wondering if you could just speak to the role of humor, if not comedy, sort of in your own life and work, and why that sort of is in some ways either compatible or divergent with traditions that precede yours, I guess.
Well, as I mentioned, I am British, therefore hilarious. So for me, it just comes naturally. No, I mean, I think that's how many marginalized communities deal with their grief, is to find a way through it in this kind of this lighter way. I think that's it makes sense to me to use it that way. I also don't think my books are funny. I'm, as I said, hilarious, but the books I don't think are funny. But I think in talking about how we met and the kind of the pain of the soil that we were on, and the irony that 2 black women should meet there on this frivolous trip to write isn't lost on me. I think British people also, we do love a little dark humour, and I think the blackness of the situation in both senses calls for a little sliver of light. Those are the things I find funniest anyway, when they're very close to being inappropriate, Did I answer your question?
You answered my question.
Yeah.
I mean, it strikes me too how compatible that is with black humor in the U.S. context as well, and obviously sort of I think that Dionne was speaking about global blackness, so that there's even something even in that kind of more unifying global sense where you can sort of pick up these echoes, despite the Britishness of your rootedness in this respect. So.
I mean the British version of The Office. I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's brutal. It's funny, but it's not really. But the reason that they initially did. That's gone. They initially did the first season of the American Office verbatim as the British one, and then they realised that people weren't resonating with it because it was too dark. And so I don't know. That's where I was grown in that field. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Other folks?
I'll take it. Yeah, pass the torch.
So I don't get too much in the camera, but yeah, I mean that irony is not lost on me. My parents, they go on day trips to plantations themselves just to not only face the reality of our ancestors, or really just like grandparents, great-grandparents, people that are still alive in my family. Like, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, so all around there is just this very dire scene, but that's my home, right? So within that, I think back to Jada's question about the gothicness and even the humor that we're talking about, I think it all comes together in a way that's so apt and important, and I wish I had an excerpt to read of it, but I'm trying to think where my question is. I think I just wanted to say something.
I love this for you. Let's say something.
What can I say? But yeah, I mean, I'm getting on at least like where, because we're talking about postpartum depression and this curse and trying to find the light within that and the hope. I think, at least I don't want to ask like contextual questions about this book or anything. Yeah, I think I'm very curious as to where the hope is coming from. Is it within not really wanting to be stagnant within this grief and feeling as though the only way out is through? I mean, I think that's what I'm very curious about, because at least with my parents, their way of dealing with this is just the only way out is through, because I can't just ignore this plantation on the way to like taking mud out of the Girl Scout camp. I mean, yeah, I'm like asking where this with hope and positivity comes within that, when you know that this is terrible, but you can't live your life as a Black person like, oh, down on yourself because of that history. Like, we have to move through that.
Yeah, I don't know where the hope comes from. I would love to give you like a really pithy, smart answer about that. I think that I draw it from many different spots, from art, from watching people protest in the street. There's so much resilience everywhere, and I don't know. I was asking my kid the other day. Okay, this is where I got my hope from recently. I was asking my kid the other day. Her name's Luca. She's 8. I was like, we were walking down the street, and I was like, Luca, what are your hopes and dreams? And she began outlining a world in which she was like, there's no money, you can collect it if you want, but like, it's a collectible item, it's not important. And we're just like, everyone has what they need, and everyone has a house and is safe. And I was like, oh, that's so lovely, but like, what about for you? And she was like, Mama, that is for me. And I was like, well, shit, I did it. I raised the perfect child. But that, for me, I was just so heartened that, I mean, we come into this world with such, I don't want to say rose-tinted glasses, because that suggests that that world that she's envisioning is not possible, and I think we have to believe that there is a world that's possible that looks vastly different to the one that we have. And if we cling to that, and if we listen to the babies, maybe we can bring it forth. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One last question.
You can get freaky with it. We don't have to stick it to literature.
Well, I do want to say the bookstore's here. We have Eirinie's amazing memoir for sale at the back, The Dead Are Gods, which is a beautiful, powerful book. Her book comes out next month. I think it's going to be to acclaimed reviews. I'm very excited about it. But you can order it either, you can use this link to pre-order, and is there a link up there as well, Aria? No? Or just, okay, just on the screens? Okay.
Or if you receive the IRR newsletter, you have it too. And just so you know, we have limited copies because because of the weather, like we got we're on back order. So if you do want to, if you run out of copies here, please place an order with the bookstore, and they will make sure that you have it available to you.
And Eirinie will sign books?
I will totally sign it. I'm also going to be speaking to Dionne at, what is the name of the bookstore in Chicago?
Oh, God, I don't
in March.
remember.
So
Yes,
if you want to see this again, but
Bring
drunker,
it down the road.
then
Yeah.
come.
So, thank you. Just join me one more time in thanking Eirinie for being here.
Sweated through my denim. Okay.